In this part of our material on error checking, we're going to look at error proofing. In other words, what I've tried to do is think through all the ways that my program could cause a runtime error and guard against them. So what I'm going to do, I'm using my real estate application, and let me first show you what happens when I try to make an error. So let's go to the developer tab and run this. Okay, so one thing I could do is not select anything. Let's see what happens if I try that. So the first thing is it tells me I have to select an agent and a neighborhood. So I'm going to do that. Now, I haven't given a price, so it's telling me the price must consist of digits only. Let's say I put in a comma. Okay, it's telling me not to do that. So now I'll take that out. Now I also have to choose a commission rate. These are optional. Okay, and that one went through. So notice also what I've done here. I've used I've used list boxes for the user to choose the agent name and the neighborhood to try to minimize the amount of typing and therefore errors that's possible. So I know that an actual agent is going to be entered and an actual neighborhood. Okay, let's take a look at the code. So we'll go over to Visual Basic. And here's the code. And what I'm going to do, I also have the code on the slides. This whole project is posted for you in the course materials. So what we're going to do with the slides is just take a look at some details of the code. So first of all, how do we check that one of the list boxes for that both list boxes had an item selected? Well, you notice that in if you recall, when we ran the program, one of them has a default, but that's really not the best choice for these. So another thing you can do is just see if anything has been selected, and the way you do that is by looking at the list index property of the list box, and if that happens to be -1, it means nothing is selected. And in that case, we give a message that you must select an agent and a neighborhood and exit. Okay, another one would be to make sure that one of the two option buttons is chosen for determining which kind of commission is going to be done. And for this, I wrote a function. Now, this may be a little bit of overkill. You know, I could have just used this line in place, but I wanted to call it out so I could show it to you. And you can look at the code yourself and see. I think it makes it maybe a little more readable. So I have a Boolean function here, and it simply checks that either one or the other of these option buttons has a value true, which means at least one of them has been picked. And of course, with option buttons, it's only one that can be picked. And in that case, I return true, and otherwise I return false. So simple enough. And then back in the code here, if we go to where that's being used, you can see here I've done check commission, and if I get a false out of it, then I'm going to say you must choose a commission rate and again jump out of this subroutine. So you saw that in action where I hadn't chosen one and it gave me the message and it kicked me out, and then I was able to go back and try again. Okay, now checking the price is more complicated, because what I have to do is actually scrutinize this input string and make sure that it only has digits in it. So I'm going to go through this piece by piece, and the first thing I did was set up some variables and constants. So I defined a constant string called digits that consists of the digits 0 to 9. And then I have some variables that I'm going to be using, the test string and its length, whether or not a bad character is found, that's a Boolean, and I'm using a variable j to loop through looking at each character in my input string in turn, and jcar will be the jth character in the string. Okay, so how do I set things up? Well, first of all, I go ahead and get the price from the string from the price text box, and I initially set that price OK is true. I'll set it to false if I find a problem. So the first thing I do here, I trim off any leading and trailing blanks, and I get its length. And then first of all, what if nothing was entered there? If the box was empty, the length will be 0, and in that case, I set the value of the price to be false, the value of the function to return false, and I exit. All right, now continuing, this next part is the main loop of the function. And what I'm going to do is set up to loop through and look at each character in that test string. So I said j equal 1, the index of the first character, and bad character found to be false. And now I'm going to loop through, and if I do find a bad character, I'm going to jump out of the while loop. So, okay. Otherwise, I'll keep going till I've looked at every single character. So the first thing I have to do is pick out the jth character, and I use the function mid to do that. With mid, you give the name of the string you're pulling something out of. Here it's test string. The j says what position, and the number says how many characters. So I just want the one character here. And now I want to see if my character that I picked is in the string of digits. In string will do that. If it's not in the string, then this will be 0. Otherwise, it'll be whatever the index of my character is within the string of digits. So if this is 0, I know there was a bad character, and I set this to true. And I also increase j, and I keep going either till I get through the whole string or I find a bad character. And then finally, if I did find a bad character, I set the value of our function to false, and then false will be returned. So that was a lot of work, right? I had to write a fairly substantial piece of code to do that. Here you can see whoops, it's the wrong part. Hang on a sec. Price OK. That's it. So price OK right here. Not too bad, but it took some thought and some research to figure out how to do this with the string functions in Excel. But the point is, it's so much nicer than just jumping to some random error place and saying, ooh, you made a mistake, or ooh, I can't handle that character, or whatever the generic message would be from Visual Basic. This slide just shows you a couple of the sources I used. I also looked on Osgrid, and that's referred to on the slide where I did that. So this is a complex topic. I could have done a lot more on it, but what I want to say is the basic point is that it's really important to do some kind of error handling. It's not a good idea, especially if other people are going to be using your program, to put it out there in such a way that only if they do everything perfectly can they use the program, because that's just not human nature. It's not what's going to happen. So doing good error checking can actually double the size of your program, especially if you're doing what I showed in this last example and really trying to think about what errors could occur and compensate for them. You know, catch them, tell the user what went wrong, and let them try again. But it's totally worth it if you want to have a nice, usable piece of code. Okay, thanks.